Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rodrigo Dimitro, and I'm the head of marketing at BuildWorks. And I'm here today with our panelist Gabriel Ferma, CEO of BuildWorks, and Robert Roger. I hope I pronounced correctly.
It's
CEO.
close. It's
It's close.
Rogi, but that's pretty
Rogi.
close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Robert Rogi, CEO of Zingboard. Thank you both guys for being here today. Well, and today we got a cool topic about if we'll have room to to translators with generative AI hanging around. So it's a spicy one, and before we start our conversation, I would like to encourage everyone to share your mother tongue, share where are you join us today in the comments, and please feel free to interrupt us as many as time as necessary. So yeah, well, I think the first step I would like to ask Gabriel and Robert to introduce themselves. Please, Gabriel, you first.
Sure. Thanks, Rodrigo, for the great introduction. Before I even introduce myself, I'm going to post here in the comments a link to a survey that we're running on my LinkedIn profile that is basically about this question. This main question that we're going to talk about today was, will translators have something to do now that generative AI is in place? And I think one of the things I love is writing purposely weird webinar titles, because when I dig into the wording, it stops making sense because I don't even know if generative AI is in place to begin with. But that's part of our topic for today. Just to introduce myself, Gabriel. I founded originally BureauWorks back in 2005. So almost 18 years here. I originally began as a translator, then evolved into more project management roles, eventually into more product-based roles, shifted the company all over from services to tech. And I love playing tennis with my kids. I love playing the guitar and being here with you guys. It's great and very excited. And thanks so much. And take it away, Robert.
Cool. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to check out BureauWorks here and what you're doing with AI, and to talk about it. I guess I'm the CEO of Zingword. I founded Zingword a while ago as a translation platform where you can find a quality translator that specializes in the thing that you're looking for. We're just now launching a new platform called Zing Talent, which allows you to manage teams of translators and synchronize that with your TMS, which is pretty exciting. And so if there are any vendor managers in the audience or local managers and you want to connect a talent management system to your TMS, just get in touch. That's I got into the industry. I founded an LSP, a small one in Barcelona, a long time ago. I've also done translations myself from time to time. And that's me in a nutshell. I also like tennis. I'm not very good at it, but I do like tennis. I also play guitar, and I'm not very good at that either, but I like to play. And
I'm not good at
it. I write. I think I might be good at writing. But
I told that to Rodrigo. I said, we were talking about you yesterday. I was like, I'm very confident that Robert is a great writer. And
Yes.
And he was like, yeah, I didn't see any blogs from him in Zingword. I was like, I'm pretty sure he's a good writer.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Cool.
All right. Well, let's get this conversation started. It's I think
Okay.
to better
Yeah.
place to.
Go ahead. You were saying, sorry, Rodrigo, I cut you off.
No. I was just saying maybe the better way to start it's you with you showing and what is
Yeah, I love starting from the beginning.
what's possible.
So let me share my screen, and I do want to. I think I have a few slides that could be helpful as well. Let me pull them up. And
Super excited to check it out.
yeah, me too. It's always nice to tour our platform. And
I was telling Rodrigo in the backstage that I think you have the best website and the best content in the business. It's really nice.
oh, thank you. That's very
Yeah, thank you.
flattering
Yeah.
to hear. And it's
Yeah.
all Rodrigo, so he's amazing.
No,
at it.
it's a team workforce, definitely.
All right, so let me share my screen here. And, all right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So just to contextualize kind of the conversation, right? The subject is, will translators have a role now that generative AI is in place? And like I was saying, first thing to debunk, I don't think generative AI is in place. I don't think it's even close to being in place. It's just starting. We'll see it in place probably in the next 10 to 20 years, maybe sooner, but it's something that's very incipient right now. The second thing is that for us from just a product perspective, right? I think that when I see translators and even industry people talking about this, or actually more specific, I would say non-industry people, it's always this dichotomy. There's like on one hand, translator, on another hand, machine. And it's either, the question is, are machines going to replace translators or not? And we're working at this from a completely different angle, right? The angle is, how can we enhance the translator experience so that translators can be better, faster, happier, more productive, make more money? That's kind of like the framework that we're taking. And the key thing before I go into like the actual product, what I want to debunk is that, and Robert, up to now, all good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Feel free to stop me. Any questions?
Okay.
Again, and also Rodrigo, please stop me if we have any comments. Again, the goal here is to be super interactive. I like to be able to talk to people. So for the longest time, right, the language structure, the knowledge structure in our in translation has been about basically very static, syntactically driven databases. So basically, like you see in here in the illustration, for glossaries, you have a term on the left, a term on the right. For sentences or translation memories, a sentence on the left, a sentence on the right. And it's basically how similar is a term or a sentence to whatever's showing up, which is basically syntactically driven rigid structures, right? So let's say a cat tool has no idea whether red is similar to reddish. It says, well, no, from a term perspective, it's completely different. Red has 3 letters, R-E-D, reddish has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters, completely different, and it doesn't see the similarity, right? Now with large language models, we're able to see that red and reddish are actually very similar. They kind of belong to the same family from a semantic perspective. So with syntax, we're kind of like, it's like, the way I think about it, it's kind of like very robotic, unfluid movements, right? It's like it either is or it isn't. It's 65% similar. Well, so what? Sentence can be syntactically very similar, but semantically very different. And just as an example, you can have, for instance, a situation where you have, let's say, a sentence that has like 15 words, but in one sentence it says if you press the button you're going to lift off, and the other sentence can say if you don't press the button you're going to lift off. Diametrically opposed meanings, very similar syntactically, right? So that's the way we've been working with knowledge. So essentially for translators, for the longest time, at least from my experience as being a translator, it's kind of a shit show. I don't have any better or more polite words to say as far as knowledge management, right? Because I'm their translator.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and I'm getting like a feed from the glossary, and the glossary isn't coinciding with the TM, and maybe the TM is giving me a context match, and it's locked, but it sucks, and the style is different than what's coming from the machine translation, and I'm left as a translator to kind of like make sense of it all. That's why we're illustrating it here, like the machine translation is in blue with little circles, the glossary is in red and yellow with little squares, and the translation memory in green with little triangles. And essentially the translator here, you can see like the source is on the left and the target are all of these crazy symbols representing how hard it is to make sense of this information that's coming in, right? And what we're going to be showing today is how large language models flip this idea on its head. And the main difference here, it's still the same thing, but the generative language engine in the middle is making sense of things so that we're able to work from a much better baseline than with a traditional paradigm. So that's like, let's say, the conceptual apparatus behind what we're going to be walking you through today. And before I start with the platform, just want to see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, it looks like an interesting idea, and because like I said, we're still trying to figure out how to use generative AI, and the way that you've kind of positioned it there in the graphic is it's exciting to think that way, to unify this sort of feed of information that the translator is getting so that they don't have it, all over. Because that's true. That's the way it's been for a long time now. So yeah, excited to check it out.
Cool. All right. So, and it works in the same example, the same situations that we're going to be talking about work in every single language. This is in Arabic.
I'm going to jump in for 1 second and just say I love the dark theme. Dark theme here is excellent.
Yeah, I love dark and light, but I do prefer the dark as well. I go sometimes back and forth just to show the difference, but I do like the dark. And again, it works in any given language. I'm going to open up an example here in Spanish, just to give you an example. And this is a really cool example, in my opinion. I'm actually going to write about this very soon. So in Spanish, like in many languages, there are different pronouns for you, more formal pronouns like usted, and more informal pronouns like tú, right? And this is a really interesting example because you see on segment 26, it says translate on your own. In the glossary right now, I have taught it that your should be usted and translate should be escriba. Obviously, we know that translate shouldn't be escriba, but that's what I'm teaching it. And in the machine translation, I don't have any TM saved for this, but in the machine translation, I'm getting the feed traduce por tu cuenta. Okay, so it's using the machine translation is using the informal version. Now, if I ask AI to translate here, and apply the translation, notice how it's saying escriba usted por su cuenta. So essentially the glossary is teaching the feed as I go. And for instance, when you translate into Spanish, it's really a pain when, let's say, the translation memory may be using usted, but the machine translation is using tú, and you have to keep making these changes again and again. With BWX Gen AI, you make this change once and you're done. Let's say we go back. It's like, oh, this is a different glossary. Let's change it back to tú. Let's ask AI to reprocess this and escriba tu propio texto. And notice as well that it's not just inserting like mindlessly the term, right? The sentence itself is changing. So in this sentence, it's saying escriba tu propio texto. When we change it to usted and reapply it, notice how it's going to change. Escriba usted por su cuenta. So it's writing a completely different sentence in order to try to fit in the glossary. But I'm going to pause here.
That's really interesting. It's as if the glossary is writing a prompt for GPT-4 in a way to get back exactly the kind of text that you're looking for, or with the right.
That's exactly what's happening. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. I mean, there's a ton of prompt engineering going on in the background, And just to explain to people who are more interested in the architecture behind it, so instead of using, let's say, the yellow, the blue, and let's confirm this as an example into the TM. It's going to detect a glossary mismatch because I have here usted, but in the glossary, but I'm using tu. Let's override it to confirm it. Now it's going to be in the TM, and what's going to happen is it's learning from the translation memory, it's learning from the machine translation, it's learning from the glossary. Like you said, as far as prompt engineering goes, instead of treating these ideas as like static databases that are just suggested to translator, it takes it a step further, trying to resolve it so that, okay, based on all this information that I have here, what is the most likely translation for any given segment?
So cool.
So, and let's switch over to Portuguese just as an example. And in this case, same kind of idea. In this sentence 28, it says provide instant quotes for your internal stakeholders or your external users. And let's say, for instance, just as an example, I said here that users should be clientes, which would be more similar to clients. Notice that this is different from the suggestion coming from machine translation, which is using users as usuários, which makes more sense. In the in the TM, which, because I already saved the segment, it's saying also usuários. Let's change it to something back different. Like let's change it users here to navegantes, which is really awkward. And the reason why I like using some awkward examples is that you'll notice, because the AI is probabilistic, it's not going to just mindlessly apply the glossary. In some cases, if it detects a certain level of weirdness in what's being suggested, it may not apply it. So let's see what happens. Quotes right now is orçamentos, which is also, it's different than the TM. The TM is saying cotações. So we taught it orçamentos. Provide, we're teaching it as providencie, which is different than the machine translation that's saying forneça. So let's ask the AI to translate it and see what happens. And notice how cool, right? So let's apply the translation to see the difference. In the TM, it's saying forneça. The suggested translation is saying providencie. Instead of cotações that's in the TM, we taught it orçamentos. It's applying orçamentos. Instead of users, it's using navegantes. But this is what's cool. Now, another mechanism kicks in here, Robert, which is what we call translation smells. So the translation smells is like a QA verifier, but it's semantic, not syntactical. So what we're normally used to QA verifiers in our industry, it's like, I'll pull them up here as an example. QA issues, filters. This is what most of us are used to when we think about QA, right? In a CAT tool. It's doubled words or empty segments or missing tags, repeated tags, trailing punctuation mark, right? That's what we're normally used to. It's like all this stuff about syntax, right? Now, what we're seeing over here is a different thing. It's saying it's flagging two different kinds of translation issues. First issue is it's flagging as an incorrect translation. The translation of internal stakeholders as partes interessadas internas is incorrect. The correct translation should be colaboradores internos ou envolvidos internos. And in my opinion, it's 100% right. I mean, I don't. It's really it's a weird translation here. Could be wrong, but I mean, the smells isn't always going to be right, but the presence of smells is highly indicative of some kind of thing that is worth at least taking a second look at, right? Second one, the translation of external users as navegantes externos is incorrect. The correct translation should be usuários externos or clientes externos. So like, as a translator now, I can work in two different levels. I can continue to edit things at the segment level. So I could go here and just say, okay, I want to change. Let's apply a smell. So let's change internal stakeholders to partes interessadas internas. Okay, so that's, but actually I want to say envolvidos internos. So let's change that. Envolvidos internos. And usuários, let's change this to usuários externos. Okay, let's click outside. Sales is running now again, and it's still picking up more problems. It's not agreeing with its own suggestion, saying partes ou envolvidas internas is incorrect. The correct translation should be interessados internos. So what's interesting about the smells is that, again, it's always reflecting on itself, right? And again, very different paradigm from like a spell check, where like you apply the spell check and you're done, right? You changed, let's say the word was missing a letter, you put in the letter, you're good. The spell check won't pick up anything. With smells, it's different. It's always trying to improve on something that could be sounding weird or clunky or funny. And as far as learning goes, if I confirm this segment, now it's going to write this to the TM.
Mm-hmm.
And now what's going to happen once this is written to the TM is that it's going to learn from that. So again, as a translator, I can choose how I'm training my own engine. I can train it at the segment level, which is, let's say, a software train, or I can train it at the term level, which is going to be a harder train. So for things that I'm very sure that I want, basically, as a translator, for things that I'm very sure that I want to express in a given way, I want to make sure I want to add it. It's better, more productive if I teach it at the glossary level. If it's stuff that I want to teach it at the, in a software way, I would just confirm the segment and it's still learning. But again, I noticed that I impact like maybe 2 tons of bricks over here. So let's see if we have any questions.
Yeah, it looks incredible. I like the idea of having this this sort of intuition along with you. To really make corrections that you don't have to make to the machine translation or the translation memory. It's pretty cool. I can imagine that this is going to save translators a lot of time. So, which is good because there's more and more content to translate every day. So that's pretty cool. Like, I guess the question might be, like, how much time do translators save using this technology? Have you estimated that, or?
Yeah. So right now, what we see is without any training, without any kind of like behavioral modification. And I'm creating, by the way, a project. While I answer this question, just a side note, Rodrigo, can we ask our audience to see if there are any languages that they'd like to see in the demonstration? And what I would love is not just the language, but when they pull up the example, if they can suggest certain terms that they would like translated a different way, we can see how AI is treating it. So, but meanwhile, I'm going to answer Robert's question. But as soon as
that's a cool idea.
You have that, just let me know and we'll pull that up. So what we have basically is we notice like across the board, 20% less edits necessary to get translations to professional grade compared to machine translation. That's without any behavioral change. So it's essentially using the CAT tool like across the board, right? And what we still notice is that many translators, like as an example, I'm going to click here in Arabic just as an example. They'll see a feed and they'll erase it, boom, and they'll start all over. And again, for me, my mother was a translator. I come from a whole background of translation, and I know that a lot of people who work with language, things are either my way and correct, or not my way and incorrect. And so it takes a different kind of approach when you're working with generative AI. To be really productive, you have to be willing to look at a sentence and be like, okay, this is not the way I would say it, but I like it. It's okay. Because that's really what, that's when you see, like, for instance, when I do that, I get to 50% more productivity easily. because I'm not that picky about. Again, it's not bad. It's just not necessarily the way I would say something, and I'm pretty laid back about that. But I know translators who are, again, they're going to see a segment and they're going to be like, nope, I don't like this
Mm,
segment at all, and I'm going to start over and I'm going to retype. And again,
mm,
BureauWorks WX doesn't have like an opinion on that. If you want to
mhm.
start typing from scratch, be our guest, and your productivity is going to go down. If you're willing to work with the AI feed and again, like in and out, so that the feed loads, then it's going to be super productive. So that's
And just
basically.
a side note, I love the
Yeah.
animations in the cat tool. You know, like
Thank you.
I've been waiting personally years and years and years for a cat tool that looks cool, and this is definitely the first one. So kudos
Uh-huh.
for that too.
I appreciate that. I think we have lots of our engineers watching, so I'm sure they're going to be happy about it. So, but yeah, I think the key thing is that it's and let's go back to the webinar topic, right? Will
Hmm.
generative AI, will translators still have something to do now that generative AI is in place, right? The question is, it's such a tricky question. That's why I love language, right? Even the way it's worded. It's like the relevance, in my opinion, this is in my opinion, is
Hmm.
going to be a function of a few things. A, how we develop the technology, because the
Yeah.
same way like Bureau works, it's all based on dynamic learning with the
Mm.
translator. That's how BWX is structured. So we're trying to vet, by we're implicitly placing a lot of value in the human intervention, right? We're
Yeah.
not just saying this is like, oh, this is machine translation with a cherry on top and goodbye
Yeah.
humans. We're saying quite the opposite. We're saying, okay, this is how we give humans
Hmm.
better instruments to deliver more translations that are better and faster. So that's
And
how.
and
So
you
there's a.
know,
Mhm.
and that makes sense too. I think both in terms of the producing quality translations, like having that human component there, and then also just segueing towards the question. Like I see a lot of things for translators to do here. So like as you showed the process, like this feed is helping them, and the translation smells is helping them, but they still have plenty of decisions to make. And like you said,
Correct.
like erasing the whole segment or not to erase, like there's a lot of decisions going on here for the translator to make. I just think it's almost like there's more executive decisions being made here about like how this text is going to be, and and maybe less of just pounding out text. And but I see a lot of decision making here for
Yeah,
humans.
it's very interesting you say that because what we've been writing about a lot is this concept called language flow architecture or language flow engineering. When you talk about these
Hmm.
executive decisions, that's exactly how we see it. It's like the instead of being the pounding, the grinding and changing words. And I mean, I remember
Hmm.
just not that long ago. I mean, I would say back in 2009, I remember I ran a study, actually even later, 2012 still was like that. I ran a study and there was a very strong correlation between typing skills and translation income. And the translators who earned the most were the best typists, not necessarily the best linguists, but the best typists. And just
That's
corroborating.
that's fascinating, and it's not surprising.
Mhm. And you could be like a great translator, like from a meaning
Hmm.
perspective. If you didn't type fast, you wouldn't be able to make rent, basically. So,
Hmm.
and the whole point of this is that typing basically is not that important anymore. You're getting a good feed. The question is, are you able to train the engine to work with you? And so like just exactly like you're saying. So step one, I think one of the prongs in this question of like, will translators still have a role, is what's the technology setting out to do? Is it setting out to replace, or is it setting out to help? And in BWX, it's very
Hmm.
clear, it's setting out to help and empower. And again, not all tech is going to be developed this way. There's a lot of tech that's kind of like, hey, just put in your video here and you'll get an AI generated version in 5 languages in 15 seconds. And sure,
Hmm.
in the demos they'll show they'll use relatively simple sentences and it sounds amazing. but that's not language, right? Language is really, really weird, complicated, nuanced, contextualized, and so that's the way we're seeing it. So that's one. And then two it is, I think that, and this is one of the reasons why we're so intent in building a very strong community, is user behavior is also going to play a huge role. And again, like the example, right? If I'm given, like you said, the ability to be more executive about my translations, but I continue to pound away and pound away and pound away and like delete segments and rewrite segments, and I get the segment out, no, I delete this, not the way I would say boom, 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 boom. I'm basically going to resign my role to being either too expensive, too slow, or too irrelevant, right? But if I work with it, then the tendency is that I'm going to be a lot more capable. I don't see it that much different than driving a car, for instance, right? If you're riding a bike and I'm driving a car, chances are that I'm going to arrive. Let's say we're on the road, right? Not in an urban place. It's in an urban place, maybe. But if we're out on the open road, it's very likely I'm going to arrive sooner than you will with my car. And again, maybe that's a bad example, but the point is that the tech is there to enable; it's not there to replace. And I think a lot of the conversation that has been taking place over the past 30 years around machine translation is always the idea of machines rendering humans obsolete, as opposed to machines rendering humans more productive, more capable, more creative. And I think honestly, a lot of the resistance to adoption has to do with that.
Yeah, and I think that's very historical as well. That people are often afraid of innovation replacing them, or reducing the usefulness of their skills. But I think that it's with machine translation, with ChatGPT, but also with a whole bunch of prior inventions that human beings came up with, like most of the time it augments our creativity, it augments the cool things that we are able to do, and I think that's the only way to see it anyways, because there's no point in seeing it the other way, which is like doom and gloom. Everything is I mean, what's the point in that, right? So but I think it's true that that technology usually augments our abilities to do stuff, to be creative, and this executive decision thing is a good example of that. Because it's making executive decisions is where the human knowledge really comes in, right? And not the fingers, like you were saying. So
I agree. And just pausing for a second, Robert, Rodrigo, do we have any language suggestions for us to load?
Yes, we have. But before, I just would like to. Susanna asked, thank you, Susanna. She asked, is it affordable for freelance translators?
Well, I'll let Susanna tell me. It's less than a Netflix subscription. I'm showing here $9 a month per user. In the personal plan, you can have up to 9 users in your account. So, definitely, I wouldn't put it on the expensive side of things, especially considering how much productivity it can provide you with.
Nice.
And if you can post maybe the sign up link, Rodrigo, in the comments, maybe people can decide to try it out. And maybe if you're feeling generous, you can even give people some kind of special code.
And I will post it as well after the event, because I mean that's a really good deal for translators.
We're trying to make it too good to refuse, but it's interesting how much, when you think about it, you don't. If I think the other day I was calculating that within like minutes as a translator, you've made your return in your investment for a month, basically. So you don't even have to translate for a full hour to be able to make your money back, essentially.
Yeah.
And unless you're charging like maybe ridiculous amounts per word, but let's say if you're charging 10 cents a word or more within minutes, and you produce, let's say, at least 3,000 words a day, within minutes you get your return on investment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really clear. I mean, less. I mean, getting a return on investment for a product that you're going to use as your workbench, basically, in less than a day's work is a good deal.
Yeah, and we're just talking about the cat experience. I mean,
Mm.
BureauWorks has a lot more.
Hmm.
As you can, how you can cluster knowledge, how you can organize your projects, and I mean, we're not even going to get into it, but it
Hmm.
does allow you to really, as a translator, keep track of everything. If you owe people money, if you
Hmm.
need to pay people money, anything that you need to do, really. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's scalable too. You can go from a translator, grow into a small team, grow into a small agency, and even into a large agency. You can go all your, let's say, growth evolution cycle through BWX.
Awesome.
Cool.
Great. And
So,
Susanna,
go ahead.
she also suggests Filipino
Mm-hmm.
Tagalog as
Okay, let's have that.
example. Yeah,
What else? Any
we
others?
we didn't have yet. Yeah, any other suggestions so far?
I'm gonna
But
pull up check because I saw that Dennis Besta was watching as well. I think he translates into Czech. Let's pull up something in Greek because I love the Greek alphabet. Um,
because
what about you, Robert? Any languages that you'd like to see? Let's open Japanese as well.
Uh, yeah, those are good. I mean, I speak Spanish actually. Rodrigo, I did. We didn't mention that before, but I do speak Spanish.
All right.
nice.
And Spanish
But
from
yeah,
Spain. Okay.
Arabic, I think,
yeah.
because we have some
Yeah. I'm
people.
picking up
Yeah,
Arabic
they
from
suggest.
Saudi Arabia, but you can pick other Arabic flavors as well.
Okay,
Cool.
And yeah, and I have one translation memory in place. I could choose others. Glossary, same thing. You can, when you create a project, it's learning from what we call an organizational unit. So you don't, basically like a project template, so you don't have to keep
Hmm.
inputting information all the time. At this stage, I can select the workflows. So, like, let's say this is just a translation and a review job instead of an in-country review job. So let's just put those two workflows. Now we create the project. And in this case, in this little circles, we're ingesting the files, running log files. We're transforming this into translatables. That's done. Now in blue, the project automation is running. And notice that the cost is going to change in a few seconds here. Should be there soon. There you go. The cost of the project has been calculated automatically based on the parameters that we've input in BWX. Again, that's not the focus of this demo, but it does do that as far as translation productivity goes. And let's take a look. Let's open it and check to see. So now we're pulling it up in our editor, and here it goes. So same file. Right now it's loading the document preview, but I was working with a web preview, and any translator also has access to that, which is pretty cool. So you can type in the URL that you're working with, and BWX is going to do its best attempt to translate to apply the translation. So, like for instance, in Get Started,
Bravo.
mhm.
notice that it's applying the suggestion for Czech, and notice too that I don't speak any Czech, but I do understand enough about alphabets to see that the machine translation is seeing something along the lines of Rogette, and I can even start to pronounce what it's saying here for Get Started. But the AI is giving a different feed than the machine translation. So what the AI, even without the glossary, even without the TMs, the AI is like this machine translation on steroids already. Whether it's better or whether it's always going to be better, I can't. Our studies don't show that that's always going to be the case, but in over 80% of the cases, the AI is going to be better than just the machine translation. So even if you're not
That's
training
a
it,
huge
yeah,
improvement. That's
yeah,
huge.
yeah, because even if you're not training it, even if you don't add terms to the glossary, you're working with like a machine translation plus GPT on steroids. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not, again, I think this is a very important distinction too. We're not working with GPT as a translator. At no point GPT is running translation functions. We're using GPT to understand, analyze, reassess, and work with these different contexts. So in this case, it's working with this translation and trying to provide something better, but never as a translation engine. And that may be a subtle distinction, but it's very important because most of the times I see translators thinking about GPT, they're like copying and pasting text into chat GPT, and they're saying, translate this to me, translate this for me,
Mm-hmm.
translate. And honestly, like we have a really good study. I think, Rodrigo, maybe you can put the link. But we ran a really cool study, like comparing at the very beginning. This was back in last year when GPT was all the craze. One of the first things we did was we studied GPT as a translation engine, and it was okay, but it was so much more evolved when it was working with context from other
Mm-hmm.
engines. We're like, oh, okay, so it makes no sense basically to try to translate with GPT. It makes sense to use GPT as a
Mm-hmm.
semantic analyzer and verifier. So it's a small,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it doesn't seem like a lot, but it changes the outcome completely.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and yeah, I really like the idea of, well, thinking about using ChatGPT in like layers of prompts in a way for different parts of a process, and so that's kind of what we're doing here, right? Is we're machine translating, and then we're using GPT to check that, to do the smells, to use the glossary. But like in a larger translation workflow, I think eventually we're going to be using ChatGPT in like different parts of this workflow, and asking it to just translate something I don't think I agree with you. It's not really necessarily what GPT is going to be great at.
Yeah, and I think you do have the option of asking AI to review as well. I don't use it that
Mm-hmm.
much, honestly, as far as my translation workflow, but it's cool sometimes if I
Mm-hmm.
have like I want a separate set of eyes to evaluate something for me
Mm-hmm.
and say, is there a better way to do this? And it's pretty cool as far as suggesting better ways to saying the same things. And in this case, we've we've structured the AI review to be 100% decontextualized from TM and glossaries, so that it's closer to what like a reader, because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things about translations that's so crazy, right? Translators are working with like style guides and glossaries and
Mm-hmm.
translation memories and instructions from clients and do not translate lists and all this stuff. But in the end, the reader, they don't know any of that, right? So the reader is just looking at
Mm-hmm.
language and like, does this sound good? Does this not sound good? So the AI review button that I just pressed is all about suggesting different translations and explaining this. So it's really cool when you're like kind of like, yeah, I'm not really happy
Mm-hmm.
with my translation. Is there a better way? You can always hit that button.
That's
And
also
again, same
interesting
thing
to
with
read it. Those suggestions,
yeah,
they look fun just to just to read.
exactly. Just from reading it, it's a provocation. Notice like I chopped off a few characters, and
Mm-hmm.
now the smells is picking up the incompleteness in the translation. So yeah, it just for me at least, one of the things that really hurts me when I was when I used to be like like I said at the beginning of the company, I was maybe translating 80% of my time, and it can get super lonely. It can get super frustrating, and you have to make, like you said, Robert, like the executive part gets buried in this rubble of like typing and figuring out this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and being able to work with an engine, like for me as an example, knowing that I'm going to get flagged for certain things makes me way more prone to being creative, because I'll take a. It's like I have like a guardrail. I'll
Mm-hmm.
take a risk. If anything, I'll bump into the guardrail. Smells is going to tell me, "Hey, are you sure? The meaning is changing." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure."
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with just any other kind of. I'm not sure whether this is the right thing or the wrong thing. Like maybe way back, I would have to call a friend or chat with
Mm-hmm.
somebody, and just being able to click on a button and be like, hey, is there a better way of saying this? And the button's like, yeah, there is a better way. And I'm like, nah, I don't agree with you. But at least I had the chance of seeing that, okay, maybe there is a better way, and
Mm-hmm.
so all of that to me, it it really removes a lot of the loneliness aspect of translating and the fear of like I cannot make a silly mistake or I'm going to get really punished here. And
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah, you
and
know,
I love. Go
And
ahead.
before we get into all this conversation, Susanna, she asked, what about privacy? Will the
Mhm.
government allow its documents be translated on the platform, giving the possibility of data leaks?
Hmm. That's a very good question. I love that question. It always comes up when we're talking about AI. So
Yeah.
right now we have
and I'll be
Filipino
happy to
data.
just let Gabriel field that one because I don't know.
So yeah, the first thing is like every government is different, every company is different. I have no idea what the requirements are, but our experience, right? We're a SOC 2 Type 2 audited company, so we're very big around security. When you sign into BWX, you do not have as a default any AI enabled. To enable AI, you have to go into my account and you have to click on this button to enable AI translation review. So when you sign in, when you create your account, this is going to be off. So you notice the changes have been saved successfully. If I click on, it's going to give me a data privacy and security warning, and it's going to link to the OpenAI and the Azure OpenAI services, which are the services that we use to empower our AI. Right. So let's say I agree with that. I'm going to type in the sentence. And again, the reason why we do that is we want to make sure that we're being very transparent with users as far as what's happening to their data. So that's number one. So if you don't activate this, your data is never leaving BWX. And if you're the account owner, the account your data only belongs to you. So
Terms
that's
also,
number
I don't know.
one. Go ahead.
Maybe you could show the terms that those links that they
Oh yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
right.
That's exactly what I'm
Yeah.
going to. Yeah, this is. So these are the terms, and this is the Microsoft, but the OpenAI is very, very, very similar. It's just one is hosted in OpenAI, and then the other is Azure. First, very important distinction: completely 100% different than the terms when you are a ChatGPT UI user, right? When we're using the API, completely different terms, completely different assurances, right? Myself personally, I never paste anything sensitive into ChatGPT just because I know the terms and I know that they're not sufficient for me. As far as the API, again, personally, I feel very comfortable, and this is why Microsoft ensures that your prompts and inputs and completion, so basically all the data flowing in and all the conclusions arrives from your data based on your prompts. They're number one, not available to other customers, not available to OpenAI, not used to improve OpenAI models, not used to improve Microsoft or third-party products, not used for automatically improving Azure OpenAI models. It's exclusively for your own use. And what's important, if you dig into it, the data is all encrypted at rest. It's deleted after 30 days. So unless you don't trust Microsoft as a brand, and I do know people who are into Web3 or crypto and have zero trust for Microsoft. I respect that perspective. Definitely not my perspective. I trust Microsoft. I trust AWS. That's the only way we can function as a cloud-based company. And for me, it's totally fine. But again, the presupposition here is that you do trust Microsoft. If you do trust Microsoft, and if you do trust any of these AWS, then in my opinion, your data is as safe as it gets.
If I can just jump in, I mean, like in my career, I remember back in 2011, thereabouts 2011, 2012, I was working as a marketing manager for a SaaS company. And the big conversation back then was the cloud and the data, and oh my God, the data is in the cloud. And but that was 11 years ago, and now I just think we're in a place where we've moved past that. We all have our data in the cloud, and it's totally normal to use this ChatGPT service with Azure because okay, the data's in the cloud, but it's private. It's not being shared with the rest of the model, just the same way that most SaaS projects work. And that's just the world now. So and I think it has been for a while. And even though GPT is a new technology, so far as being in the cloud is concerned, it's the same like all the other applications we use today. So and crypto people I don't know about, but I don't know how many crypto translators are out there, but
I don't know many, but I like to think about outliers just because again, not everybody trusts Microsoft, so I don't want to just assume that the trust is there. And I like the parallel that you do with the cloud. I mean, I remember that when we first began using cloud-based services back in 2012, it was like such concern over it. It's like, oh my God, it's exactly like I mentioned. It's in the cloud, it's unsafe. It's in the cloud, it's unsafe. And eventually it's in the cloud. It's actually a lot safer than any physical machine, typically, unless like it's like completely like unencrypted or terrible passwords. But assuming the right level of security standards, any data is much safer in the cloud than in any given device, right? The device can be stolen.
It's amazing that was ever a conversation, because people at the time, they really thought that their data was safer on a server in their closet. And it is not safer on a server in your closet. So,
100%. And I want to show before I think we're reaching close to the end, but Rodrigo, any questions so far?
No questions so far.
Okay. So just as another aspect, Robert, I want to show you about the AI capabilities as well. So this is English into Spanish, right? I confirmed a few segments, so showing now 14% translated. Let's open this in the review workflow now. So now in the review workflow, the segments that I confirmed are already here. And now when I begin changing this, and let me pick a better example, something that I do want to change here. I'm saying es hora de reimaginar la gestión. Let's change this to la administración as an example. De la traducción. Once I click outside of it, BWX is going to try to categorize this change, and it's labeling it as a terminology change, and it's saying the translated word gestión means management, which is a correct translation. However, the review translation uses administración. Both words are correct translations, but gestión is more commonly used in the context of translation management. So it's trying to label the change. It's trying to explain the nature of the change. If I mark it as reviewed now, I can see the changes with track changes. But most importantly, as let's say, we really think that like dialogue around this is really crucial. So this flows into and let me switch here into, I can say I don't agree as the translator. Like this is going to flow to me. I prefer and I can disagree, and that's going to be stored over here. This comment, and essentially this flows into the quality module as well. Every single review that we perform is over here. So this is a change that we just made, and I can see the comments, and I can see that there's a conflict between the reviewer and the translator. So this is also kind of really cool, right? Because every single change gets cataloged, and again, the cataloging that takes place is suggested by AI, but I can always override it. So here's the third example. Let's say I change this from mas to like this, and let's see how it categorizes it. And I can always override the comments. I can override the change, and the engine is also trained. In this case, the categorization is trained to try to agree with the translators, assuming that the reviewer is making correct choices. We could configure it differently, but that's the assumption. But I can always go here and say, no, this is not terminology that's just preferential, and it didn't improve anything, and it's just for gigs. And that's reviewed, and that's going to flow into that same report that we were here. If I update it now, I'm going to see the change that we just made.
Very cool.
But I think the key thing I want to illustrate just is like the dialogical aspect of this. It's like the translator is dialoguing with the AI. The translator is dialoguing with the reviewer. The reviewer is dialoguing with the translator. I think there's too often this very reductionist idea of language. That language is, and it comes way back from the computational models. It's like language is input output. It's like you say something, you say something back. Prompt response, prompt response, prompt response, prompt. And I think even the way people think about large language models is a lot like that. It's more prompt response than conversation. And for us, like the real beauty of it lies in enhancing the conversational aspects of translations.
I think it looks really cool in that sense, and just like because I don't know how much time we have left. I'm available at past time, but like my remark, at this point is just to say like it looks like fun to use your cat tool, and it looks like fun to use the AI. It looks like fun to use the smells. It looks like also relaxing, like the tool is helping you in a way that makes you more efficient, but also can kind of take the edge off of translation work, because translation work has an edge to it, and I think that this kind of helps to like take that edge off, and produce good translations and save time and just the whole thing. So kudos for that. I love the design. I love the colors too. Translators are going to spend 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day working in BureauWorks. So it's like the least you can do is make this thing cool, and it's definitely cool, and it's definitely going to save them time, and it looks like fun. So that's in a nutshell. That's my impression.
Well, we have another question here from Mariam. I be utilized within the education system?
Oh, it's already being utilized in the education system, but I know that teachers are using ChatGPT to write their syllabuses. They're using it to create homework assignments. They're using it to grade homework assignments. Like I'm not sure in what way Mariam's referring to.
What was the question, Raju, exactly?
Yeah, she is wondering if we estimate when do AI will be utilized within the education system.
Ooh, I have no idea. I mean, like Robert said. I mean, I think it already is used, but again, as a general thing, I wouldn't even dare say it's not my expertise.
Well, for students, I think probably it's massive.
Yeah, for sure.
I know plenty of teachers, and they're all using it. So I can answer confidently that teachers are also using GPT.
Well, we have they saying I mean allowing students to make the best of it. Yeah, it's a long conversation about it. I think yeah.
Yeah, no, that's probably the good topic for another webinar, because I think
definitely.
This is one thing that I also think that generates a lot of confusion, is that people talk about generative AI as a thing, but it's not a thing. Every application is completely different. So like if you look at generative AI in BWX, I'm very confident that we're not trying to cheat anybody, or like it's not like a student trying to pretend like the essay was written by them, but it was written by GPT. It's like the translator is the author. They're just being helped, aided by GPT. And I think go ahead, Robert.
I was just to add on to what you were saying. Like I meant allowing students to make the best of it or the worst of it. And I just wanted to say that same thing. Like what you're doing at BureauWorks is helping translators to make the best of the technology, not the worst of it. So, just using ChatGPT to well, I don't know, rip off their customers or something is not what's happening here in BureauWorks at all.
Yeah, and I think again, it's like that's why I I think so much of the conversation is about going deeper into it, right? It's not like using AI or not using AI. It's like how are you using it? You know, if you're getting a translation
Mm-hmm.
and you're just like putting it, copying and pasting it to GPT and like getting it out and formatting it, it's like probably not a good use of your time, or probably not very even ethical. You know, it's like in this case, you're just clearly being aided. You're the person who's confirming every given segment. You're the person who's authoring it. You're just getting a better feed. In the same way with the transition memory, nobody would question your authorship. You're still getting a feed from the transition memory. It's just a contextual tool, right? So, and again, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one of the challenges is that when you go, there's like this divide, right? It's like uh, translators are basically thinking, I'm going to be out of a job. I don't like Gen AI. It's my enemy. It's going to get me out of a job. People who don't understand anything about translations, like, why would I spend money translating it? I'm just going to grab my site and I'm going to translate it with GPT or machine translation, whatever. And I also don't need translation. So it's like things become very polarized, very superficial and shallow very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start like digging into it and you start looking at, and this is one of the cool things. Like I've learned a lot about SEO with Rodrigo over the years, and one of the beautiful things about SEO is that like Google as a search engine is able to consistently reward for better content. So, you know, just thinking that you can have your site translated, yeah, sure, you can have your site translated by machine translation, would perform well from an SEO perspective. I'm not even talking about keyword relevance. I'm just talking about a site that's not beautifully written in a certain language is not likely to perform well, either because users bounce, either because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
rank well, either because it's not backlinked by other sites, either
Mm-hmm.
because users don't spend a lot of time reading the pages. But there are
Mm-hmm.
so many indicators for behavioral indicators for quality content that people are overlooking, right? So it's not, again,
Mm-hmm.
the way we see it here at PWX is like what's going to happen is that now you're going to have, I mean, there's one thing that we've observed, and that's across industries, is like a translator that's aided by this technology is much less likely to deliver a crappy translation, right? It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like even if I don't speak a word of, let's say, for instance, Czech
Mm-hmm.
here, I'm going to deliver something that makes sense. Yeah, maybe it's going to be machine-like. Maybe it's going to make some mistakes that I wouldn't want to wouldn't want to make, and so on. But it is going
Mm-hmm.
to
Raise the floor.
it is. And again, sorry, just saying, check this is Tagalog. So let's pull up here the
Yeah,
the check
and
you see.
and
So
and
it
sorry
does raise
to
the floor, but
yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
we have one more question. Now it's about the platform.
mhm.
Danielle, are there any limits as to how many thousands of words translators can run through BWX within the subscription? A fair use
Yes,
policy? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's a great question. So right now the limit is at 100,000 words per user per month. So if you need more to process more words, you would have to sign up with more users. But 100,000 words is quite a bit of words. And again, it's target, right? So if you're working with a project that's going to 3 languages and it has 3,000 words, that's going to be 9,000 words. And it's just process. So that's something important to keep in mind. So even if you just process the words in BWX, like let's say you don't go through with the translation project, you were just quoting, we still have to process the words. So we still count them as processed words.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's quite a bit. And again, pretty inexpensive. Like let's say you have to do 3 times that, then we're talking about $27 a month.
Mm-hmm. It's still an amazing deal, and I mean, if you're improving your productivity by 50%, there's an opportunity right now, I think, for translators, regardless of how they feel about the future of the business or GPT, to jump on BureauWorks now, increase their productivity, and earn a lot more money. I mean, it's an instant improvement to their bottom line.
Yeah, and it's just a side note, but Perhaps my favorite users are my parents. They're users of BWX. They're retired. They translate. They work together. They're over 75
Mhm.
years old, and it took them a while to get the hang of it, but now they love it. They love it. They use it to translate all the time, and they're amazed with how much more they're able to produce. So again, we're not talking about, this isn't a tool that you have to be a techie to use. You can use it regardless of your age, regardless of your technological savviness. Yes, in all honesty, like, it does have its learning curve, but it's super worth it. Like, within a very little time, you're going to be producing a lot. And I think,
Mhm.
the other just key concept that I wanted just to emphasize is that, again, as far as what it does, right? So the baseline gets increased. Like I don't speak a word of Czech, but it's not going to be typically, right. It's going to be better than machine translation. It's typically not going to be nonsensical. Typically going to be, let's say, closer to acceptable, right? But then
Mhm.
what happens is that the and we were talking about Google, right? And how Google ranks content. And sure, the search engine is also going to become more AI based, less about indexation, but it's still going to have to produce results, and people are still going to have to navigate through pages. Maybe the experience is going to change. But the fundamental thing about content is that good content matters, right? So, what's going to happen, and this is just, in my opinion, as you raise the let's say the standard, because now, let's say, right now, without AI, you can have a really terrible translation or a really good translation, and everything in between. In theory, like, as Gen AI improves, you're not going to see shitty, terrible translations. You're going to see okay translations, and that has the tendency over time to lift the higher bar as
Mhm.
well. People are going to want to see better and better and more fluid and more naturally sounded translations, and that's going to happen with content as well. I mean, it is happening with content. Instead of seeing, for instance, only a single and look, just as the sentence as an example, just curious, like, it picked up three different translation errors based on its own translations. So, instead of seeing, let's say, a single version of a text, you're going to have one version for you, Robert, for a male in your demographics living in Spain,
Mhm.
people in my demographics living in California. You're going to see a different um, text for Rodrigo's wife, female living in Canada, and so on. And so you're going to have more variants of the same content, more variants of the same translation, and then more iterations over the same content. So
Mhm.
that's why, in my opinion, going back to, will translator have a place? My opinion is yes, even a much bigger place. It's just going to shift exactly how you were saying, just to tie it all back together. It's a more executive place. It's a less grunt work place. So if you ask me, is the grunt work,
Mhm.
does it tend to diminish? Yes, the groundwork tends to go away. Does the relevance of a good language architect tend to increase? My response would be yes. It tends to increase because
Mhm.
now the translator is not just translating, they're training. And as a trainer, you're performing a more higher valued task than as a translator. But I don't know,
Mhm.
Rodrigo, if you have any more questions, or Robert, any more comments. I think we're already 10 minutes over, and I don't want to bore people out of their minds. But let me know
Yeah, I'm
how.
not bored, but
We don't have question.
I think we
um,
covered quite a bit of ground, but go ahead, Robert. Any closing remarks?
yeah, yeah. I actually, just a second though, I had one, but then when we were talking about, it just poof, it disappeared. Um, yeah, I mean, no, it's exactly what you said, and I mean the content explosion is it's just exploding more. So I've often had the same question at Zingward, like what's the future of the translation business, and the answer is always content explosion, because that's just the truth. The content, it's just, as we can translate more, as we can translate faster, we come up with more uses for content and more specific things to do. There was in the 1970s in California, I think where you are, they built the freeways in Los Angeles, and they had this huge project to build these freeways. And I think we all know that Los Angeles has big freeways, like 10 lanes, and the idea was to solve traffic once and for all in Los Angeles. So they built these huge freeways. And then what actually happened was, because people could drive more and faster and further, they did that. They drove more often, and they went across the city more frequently. They moved farther away from where they were working, and the traffic problem did not really get solved. And that's just like this. It's like you can translate more, you can translate better, you can translate faster. It's more executive. It's fun to do, but companies, other people that are creating this content, they're going to find ways to make use of more content, and that's what's going to happen.
I agree. I think that that's maybe we're way too optimistic about outcomes, but that's how I see it. And if we, like you said, if we look back, I think that's been the trend. I do think that, like I said, I don't think it's going to get any easier though. The demands for good content are only going to get harder and higher. So it doesn't mean so it's like it's neither, right? Will AI make people's lives easier in some ways? Will it would get people out of a job? Some cases, but for the most part, it's really going to just make standards higher, right? And I think that's a constructive way of approaching it, at least.
Agreed.
All right. I think that's all for today.
Perfect.
And yeah, I would like to invite everyone who didn't sign up in our platform yet, yeah, to take advantage of this moment and sign up. I just share it, the link in our comments. Then yeah, it's a pleasure. It's I hope everyone enjoyed the insights today, and well, see you next week in our next events.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
Bye.
Thank you, Robert. Great being with everybody here
Thanks for
today.
having me on.
Bye
Bye bye,
bye.
everyone.